All right, Brian, in part four of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're continuing the discussion with the Notre Dame cornerbacks, but we're kind of broadening our view, and we're not just talking about the outlook for the 2026 season. And I was really excited when you told me that this is what we're talking about today. So, two different topics, but still looking at it from Notre Dame's perspective. We're going to talk about the top 10 cornerbacks at Notre Dame from 2000 to 2025. Now, players like Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, they're not going to be on this list because their careers at Notre Dame aren't done yet. And it would be unfair to put them in a ranking spot when they could both be impacted by their performance in 2026.
Yeah.
So we're taking a look of 2000 to 2025, excluding those guys.
Yeah, of guys who've completed their careers. Now, even if we were including them in this list, Leonard Moore's on here. Like, he'd be in our top 10, but we want to let him, and we'll talk about where Leonard Moore can finish when we're done. But I thought this would be a fun conversation, Trev. And, Notre Dame's had some very good corners, but it's a position that they just consistently haven't produced like really the elite players is the knock on Notre Dame. But when you look at this list, you're like, yeah, but there's been some really good football players on this list as well. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of talk through our list and go 10-1 and give our reasons why we are. Then after that, Trev, we will go through and talk about the guys that are our top 5 duos from 2020 to 2025. And those in which those we will talk about the current players in that regard, because those duos are done. The 2025 duo can be evaluated for what they were. The 24 duo can be evaluated for what it was. And so we'll have that conversation as well, Trev, if we can. So we're going to go 10-1. We'll just go back and forth, 10, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8, 8, 8, and 7, 7. So, Trev, we'll let you kick it off. And some of these we have the same. So actually, I'm sitting here actually looking at the list. I'm like, man, actually, we're spot on. I'm like, nope. I'm looking at my list on the tweet I sent you, and then my list on my sheet. Like, nope, we're on the same page. A lot of the same guys. I think there's only one guy in the two top 10s that I don't have or that you have. There's one difference. And I'll talk about why I don't have him. And I know why you don't have him, because you didn't see him play. So let's start off with your number 10 cornerback, Trev.
Yeah, my number 10 cornerback on this list is Darren Walls. And this is really the highest that I could put him, because there were things with development that didn't go his way. I blame the coaching staff, not necessarily him. He had absolutely elite tools. A couple weeks ago, might have been a month ago, I talked about what would have happened if Mike Mickens got his hands on a guy like Darren Walls. When some of the things that I evaluated on was just production, impact, how you were on the team, like relative to other players on the team. And that's kind of why Darren Walls made this list for me. Is he was one of the bright spots on like the 07 team, the 08 team, where the defense really just kind of wasn't there. Same thing with the 09 team. Like, Darren Walls was somewhat of a relative consistent presence on that defense. I always think back to that. I can't remember if it was a pick 6 and it was actually considered a pick 6, or I think it was a pick 6 against Penn State on the road in 2007. And I always think back to that. He was one of the few bright spots on that defense that year. And I also go back to the elite tools that he had. He's more so a what if for me, but I put him in the top 10 because he had elite tools. He was a productive player when he was at Notre Dame. So he's number 10 on my list, Brian. How about you, man?
He's right off my list. And it really comes down to, I love Darren Walls, and he's one of those guys, and Cole Luke's another one where I say, if they just could have been coached by a Mike Mickens or somebody like that, how much different their careers would have been. The other thing with Darren Walls is he lost the 08 season because of an academic issue, and he never quite bounced back from that. I was a big, other than that, like, I was a big Darren Walls fan. He's very talented, very good coverage player. His first year as a starter was in 07. Trev, you mentioned the pick 6 against Penn State. He had 9 breakups that year. He was one of the few like bright spots on that 07 defense. He had 6 breakups in 09. Coming back from the suspension, he had 27 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, a pick, 6 breakups in 2010 as part of a 3-man rotation at corner. He had 41 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 picks, and 4 interceptions. Had a very strong career. It's just that missed year kind of hurt him a little bit for me, and the fact that they just never got the most out of him. And I put that more on the coaching than I do Darren Walls. But my number 10, Trev, is Bennett Jackson. I think Bennett Jackson is one of the more underrated Notre Dame cornerbacks of the last 25 years. He just doesn't get the love. I mean, this is a guy that was a starter on the 2012 team that went 12-0. He was never a star corner. He was never like an All-American corner. He did get drafted. Spent his first year, if not, actually was it his first year? And because he was part of the 11 class, I thought. Maybe he's part of the 10 class. I'd have to go back and look at that. But he's a guy, Trev, that spent, I think, his first 2 years in college playing receiver. At least, definitely the first one. He was like number 82 or something like that. Moves to
86,
cornerback,
baby.
Yeah, moves to cornerback, and then starts on the 2012 team. Has a very good season, 65 tackles, 4 interceptions, 4 breakups. He's also the starter opposite Kavari Russell in 2013. Has 64 tackles, 5 pass breakups, 5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups. Goes and gets drafted in the 6th round. Was part of a very, very good 2012 defense. Not a star like some other guys on the list, but a very good football player for Notre Dame, and a guy that was just had one of those "I'll do whatever you need me to do, coach" type of mindsets, and had some big plays in 2012 and 2013. You go back and watch highlights of those seasons, you'll see some big plays from Bennett Jackson in those years. Really fun player to watch.
I echo a lot of your same sentiment. He's my number 9 guy. Bennett Jackson, that 2012 defense, a lot of people talk about Manti Te'o and Stephon Tuitt and Lewis Nix, and I understand that. But opposite of Kavari Russell, who started as a true freshman on that defense, was Bennett Jackson, a converted wide receiver. And he was an exceptional player on that defense. Agree with you 100%. Not much more to add, but he's my number 9 guy. He's a very unsung hero of that defense.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I have Vontez Duff as my number 9. Trev, we talked about this before the show. You can look. You never watched Vontez play. You were, I think, 3 when they signed him. You have Shane Walton on your list later because you can look at the resume and the stats and be like, dude, that was really impressive. And you can go back and look at stuff. Vontez was always a little bit overshadowed by Shane Walton because Shane Walton was a tremendous player. But I was a big fan of Vontez Duff, even as a return man. He was a great high school running back in high school as well. He was one of my favorite recruits when I was a teenager. Really liked Vontez, and he actually played for Notre Dame as I got into my coaching career. Is when he was coming to Notre Dame. But 2013, when you look at his career, Vontez had 25 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 breakups in 2021, 36 tackles, a pick, and 6 breakups in 2002, and then had 2 interceptions and 4 breakups in 2003 as he formed one of the better duos, as we'll get into later, with Shane Walton. Was also a pretty good return man. I think he had a kick return for a touchdown in 2002 against Maryland, I believe, as well. But I liked Vontez Duff. He's on my list for me. Really good football player. I have him as number 9.
Understandable. Yeah, absolutely. Number 8 for me is Robert Blanton. And one of the things that just kind of was rough for Robert Blanton was that he was a part of a stretch of defenses at Notre Dame that weren't known for being great defenses, unfortunately for him. But I go back through and I look at what he did in his career at Notre Dame. He was a very consistent, reliable player. I mean, his first 3 years, 08, 09, and then 2010, he really started to break out. But a lot of his stats look pretty identical. 2 interceptions every single year of college. He had 2 interceptions in 08, 2 in 09, 2 in 2010, and then 2 in 2011. Only returned one of them for a touchdown. That was in 2008. I'm always going to remember the block punt that he had against Utah in 2010 that he also ran in for a touchdown as well. But he was a very consistent cornerback at a time at Notre Dame where cornerback play was pretty up and down. And that's the best way that I can explain him. He was Mr. Consistent. I always thought it was funny watching him run around and play. And he was a cornerback that wore number 12, didn't have the gloves, didn't have a lot of the call it on-field accessories that a lot of other cornerbacks played with. He would just run around with no gloves, no wristbands, no elbow pad, nothing, no sleeves. Just go out there and be very consistent. And so he's number 8 on this list for me because he kind of started that trend of consistent cornerback play at Notre Dame that we've seen take off really over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's Robert Blanton for you, correct? Mine, I'll talk about him in a second. I'll go my number 8. You and I had the same 8 and 7 and 8. we had the same 7 and 8, but I just had him reversed. I had Troy Pride as my number 8. I loved Troy Pride, one of the most underappreciated cornerbacks that Notre Dame has had. I don't know why, but he got so much flack from Notre Dame fans in 18 and 19. Early in 18, Troy had some struggles, and he had an interesting career. Struggled against, I think it was Vanderbilt. He got hurt, missed the Pitt game, and when he came back, he was a very different cornerback. I actually made this argument. If you look at like the last 5 or 6 games of the 2018 season, I would argue he was better than Julian Love in the last 5 or 6 games, including against Clemson. I remember watching that game. They tried to run a slant on him early in the game, and he almost picked it. And they only threw one other pass at him the rest of the game. Like, they threw a deep shot, and he just had the guy locked down. They avoided him like the plague. The only completion he gave up in that game was a hitch route on off coverage. He was phenomenal in that game. And then he comes out in 2019, and he was like the lead corner in 2019. I thought he was outstanding that season. 26-17, he was part of a rotation at cornerback, played a lot, 22 tackles, 1 pick, 2 breakups, had 2 interceptions and 10 pass breakups in 2018, and then 1 pick and 6 breakups in 2019 in a season where they just didn't throw at him all that much. Troy had a little bit of Christian Gray in him that occasionally his technique would get him in trouble, but it was not often. He was a really good football player for Notre Dame, a really good cover player, and a really good guy. Troy was always someone that I had a lot of respect for because he never, I'm sure he heard the noise just like Christian does, but he just kept plugging away and was a very respected teammate. Disappointed that his career in the NFL kind of went south because of a knee injury. He just hasn't been the same, but he's still plugging away. Really, really awesome player for Notre Dame. Very, very good player for Notre Dame. Definitely a no-brainer top 10 player for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I have him as my number 7 guy. I echo a lot of the same things that you said about Troy Pride. From your explanation of Vontaze Duff, I think with Troy Pride, a lot of the reasons why he gets overlooked and is underappreciated is, he was what Vontaze Duff was with Shane Walton in the room. I mean, Troy Pride was just always kind of around the Julian Love conversation. I think that's what Christian Gray's kind of suffering from right now is, yeah, Christian's good, but I mean, he's playing next to BMO and Leonard Moore. Why can't he be that? And it's like, because he's not BMO or Leonard Moore. The same reason why Troy Pride isn't Julian Love, and the same reason why Vontaze Duff wasn't Shane Walton. So I kind of file him into that grouping. But Troy Pride is absolutely a top 10 cornerback at Notre Dame since 2000. I echo everything that you said about him. I'm with you.
Yeah, and his numbers, if you go back and look at his numbers from his time at Notre Dame, he was a very good player. I think his last year, he allowed. Let me just pull this up to make sure that I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I believe in his last season together, he allowed a completion percentage that was basically the same as Julian Love. But in Julian Love's All-American season of 2018, he allowed a 53.2% completion rate, gave up 42 completions for 413 yards, gave up 9.8 yards per reception. That's what Julian Love did in his All-American season. So 42 catches allowed for 413 yards, 9.8 per catch, 53.2 completion rate. In Troy Pride's last season in 2019, he allowed a 54.2% completion rate, so slightly better. Only allowed 32 catches for 337 yards, 10.5 yards per reception as a field corner. He was a very good football player, and the production was there. So very underrated player, definitely top 10 for me. My number 7, Trev, is your number 8. Robert Blanton's another guy. He ended up playing safety in the NFL. Very good football player, physical. What I love about Robert Bland is he was a good cover player, but he was a really good all-around player. Again, good cover player in his career. You don't start for basically 4 years, which is kind of what he was, without being a good cover player. But you look at Robert Bland, and he had two picks and 3 breakups in 2008, 2 interceptions and 2 breakups in 2009, 2 interceptions and 5 breakups in 2010, and then 41 excuse me, hold on a second. Let me see, 8, 9. So I think I got his numbers confused with somebody else's there. But he had, let me pull it up. Give me a second, because I have 5 years for him, but I have 1 season from somebody else repeated. So let me just give me a second. Robert Blanton, college stats. And then there was a year he had 7 tackles for loss, Like he was a great player against Navy. Yeah, his last 2 years as a corner, he had 15 and a half tackles for loss. Like in 123 tackles, 2.5 sacks, picked off 2 passes every year of his career, and had 5 breakups in his last 2 years. Was he a star cover player? No. He was one of the best all-around corners on this list. He was a very good football player. And here's where he is number 1. He was the most physical hitter of everybody on this list. Robert Blanton laid wood on people in his career at Notre Dame. And that's one of the many reasons he's on this list for me.
Absolutely. Dude could lay the lumber. That is for sure. The number 6 player on this list for me is Mike Richardson. He was a cornerback at Notre Dame from 04 to 06, and he was really kind of my first introduction to a big game cornerback, and that's why he's on this list for me. You go through and you look at what he did in bigger moments from 04 to 06. I mean, against really good competition. On the road against number 3 USC in 2006, he had a pick. In the Sugar Bowl against LSU, obviously we know that neither of these games ended up well for Notre Dame, but he had a pick in that game. In 2005, he had a pick at home against USC, the number 1 team in the country. The week before that, he had an interception on the road against number 22 ranked Purdue. And then in 2004, in the season opener on the road against Michigan State, he also recorded an interception. So he was my introduction to, okay, you need a play. All right, 30, go make a play. And that's what he did throughout his career. He missed the top 5 for me because outside of that, it was like he was still a very good cornerback, very productive. But what kept him out of the top 5 was like I wanted to see that all the time. And so, but he's definitely top 10 cornerback at Notre Dame.
He's my number 6 as well. I have him number 6 because he was probably he was the most of the 6 through 10. He was the most steady. Like, he wasn't the reason they got torched by LSU and Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like, he was really a steady Eddie player. He didn't have the physical tools that, you know, that Troy Pride had and some of the other guys had. He didn't have that elite speed. He wasn't the biggest guy. He's one of the smaller corners on this list. But man, he was just steady. You kind of, you know, like I always felt you knew what you were going to get from Mike Richardson all the time. He didn't have that other gear he could take it to. He was clutch, Trev, like you mentioned, but he didn't have that lockdown in him. I can live with that. But he also didn't get you beat. He was just a steady football player, a clutch football player. He was the number 1 corner on 2 teams that played in the Fiesta Bowl one year and the Sugar Bowl the next year, and was an important piece of Notre Dame really turning the program around under Charlie Weiss. Mike Richardson was a very underrated player, and that's why he's number 6 on my list.
No, I love it. Absolutely love it. Let's get into the top 5 here. My 5th guy is Kavari Russell. And obviously we've talked about him already when we were discussing Bennett Jackson, but he's somebody that started as a true freshman on that 2012 defense. To be able to crack the starting lineup on a defense like what Notre Dame had in 2012, that's special. He had elite tools. He was exceptionally fast. He was a long corner. I remember he was a pretty high-waisted corner. He had a really short torso, very long arms, very strong for the position, very, very fast. He was a productive player, always had at least 50 tackles every year. And then he was a big part of that 2015 defense as well, lining up with Cole Luke. But one of the things that prevented him from being a little bit higher for me was the suspension in 2014. That was unfortunate because it's almost like I almost viewed as like incompleted work, which some people might call me a hypocrite for who I have ranked as number 1 on this list, but I'll get to him down the road. But for Kavari Russell, that's what prevented him from being higher. But elite tools, that was, again, I talked about Mike Richardson being like my first exposure to, you know, that consistent, steady kind of big game cornerback. Kavari Russell was my first exposure to like, okay, that's a cornerback with elite tools, speed, length, good size. So he's my number 5 guy.
My number 5 guy is a little bit of a change from the list I sent you, Trev. My number 5 guy is Cam Hart. Cam was an outstanding player at Notre Dame. Loved Cam Hart as a player. His 23 season might be the second best season of any cornerback on this list outside of what Julian Love did in 2017. What's funny is I thought Julian Love was even better in 2017 than he was in 2018. Like the year he was a unanimous All-American, he was very good. I thought he was even better in 2017. You know what I mean? And Cam, to me, his season stacks right up there with Benjamin Morrison's 2022. I actually think his 23 was better than Benjamin's 2022. I think his 23 was better than Julian's 2018. It was better than any other year than any other. I think the only other season that stacks up would be Shane Walton in 2002. His 2023 season was elite. The most underappreciated elite season we've seen from a Notre Dame player. Because he didn't have the production that people looked for. Right? He didn't have a single interception in 2023. He only had, I think, 4 pass breakups that season, 3 tackles for loss, 21 tackles. Well, the reason he had those numbers, but he was like in the top 10 in college football on forced fumbles that year. The reason he didn't have any production is nobody would throw at him. Like, they kept throwing at Benjamin Morrison because it's like, what's the alternative? Throwing at Cam Hart? Like, I mean, that's kind of where it was. He was elite in 2023. The only reason Cam doesn't rank higher on my list is because that was his only elite season. 21, he was solid. 22, he was good, but he was still a guy that was clearly learning all the ins and outs of playing corner. Because remember, he transitioned. He played receiver his first year at Notre Dame. And so Cam was always sort of you felt like his best football was going to be ahead of him, which it doesn't shock me that from talking to people that watch the NFL all the time, he's been really good when healthy his first 2 years in the NFL. He's been a 2-year starter for the Chargers, again, when healthy. But Cam was, a guy whose just career was not his entirety of his career wasn't as good as some others because the position changed and then the learning in the new position. But his 23 season was as good as what anybody else did, in my opinion. It is in that conversation. But that was good enough, and he was still good enough in 21 and 22. I mean, he had the 2-pick game against Wisconsin in 2021, so there were clearly some moments. That's kind of the way I look at it. But I still think this was an absolutely tremendous career from Cam Hart, and that's why he's number 5 on my list.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse, man. He's number 4 on my list, and I echo everything that you said about him. His 2023 season was elite and probably the best performance I've seen from a field corner at Notre Dame in my lifetime. It is Cam Hart's 2023 season. He was exceptional. One of the reasons, like you said, that he didn't have the production that Ben Morrison had is because teams just didn't want to throw at him. And when they did, they weren't successful. Not necessarily saying it ended up in a pick or a pick 6 every single time, but Cam Hart's number 4 on my list for all the reasons that you listed off.
Who's your number 3? Who's your number 4, Trev? He's your number 4?
Yeah, Cam Hart's my number 4.
My number 4 is Benjamin Morrison. And this is the biggest what if on this list for me. Because Benjamin was on the verge of climbing to number 1 on this list. Best freshman season of anybody on this list. Like, by far. 6 picks as a freshman, 4 pass breakups, was a heck of a player for Notre Dame in 2022. He was very good in 2023. Not great, but very good. 10 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, just a really good all-around player for Notre Dame in 2023. 2024, he was on the verge of just kind of taking his game to another level. And he had a great game against A&M. I thought he was very good against he missed he didn't miss a game. That was Christian Gray. Was very good against Louisville in that matchup. They tried to go to him, didn't work. He was off to a great start, and then of course he has the season-ending injury, and that was such a disappointment because I felt like Benjamin was on the verge of really kind of putting together just another great year. I think he was on the verge of maybe having an All-American caliber season, in my opinion. And then of course the injury happens, and we never got to see Benjamin kind of fulfill what he could have been. But even with what he did, the 2.5 years of what we got was outstanding. And without a doubt, the best freshman season of any player on this list. But had he not got hurt, I truly believe he's at worst 3rd on my list, if not 2nd or 1st. But just the multiple seasons, the collective of the guys ahead of him is why he's not higher. But when he was healthy, Trev, Benjamin Morrison was an outstanding football player for Notre Dame. I mean, think about his production in 2.5 years. for Benjamin Morrison. He's got, see here, nine interceptions in 2.5 years. He has 18 pass breakups in basically 2.5 seasons. And remember, he didn't start the first 4 or 5 games of his freshman year, but he was still playing. But I even remember, because I was very high on Benjamin Morrison coming out. And I remember the Ohio State game when they put him in and he has a pass breakup and you're like, yep, he's every. I mean, you could see it right away. Like, yep, he's everything that you thought he was going to be. He was an all-time great at Notre Dame. I just wish the injury hadn't kept us from seeing 3 full years, because I would have, like, the postseason in 24 could have been that final thing that we saw from him that allowed him to make that jump into the top of this list for me. So that's why I have Benjamin number 4.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. I also realized, by the way, there's a typo in the text that I sent you. Shane Walton is actually my 3rd guy. And the reason that he's not higher on my list is just because I'm strictly going off of accolades. Unlike some of the other players that I've talked about on this list, I can't go back to a game that I remember seeing him play. I just know that the numbers that he produced and what he did in the 2002 season when he put up 7 interceptions, host of tackles. I know that, and from everything that I've heard, the stories that you've talked about, what people talk about in the chat, Shane Walton is absolutely a premier top cornerback that has played at Notre Dame since 2002. I don't want to do him a disservice and not dive into his game. I'm sure you will make up for that. But I just don't, I can't speak much more on that. He's the number 3 cornerback for me, strictly just off of the accolades that he brought to the table. So he's my number 3 guy.
Having seen Shane Walton, yeah, I have him higher, but my number 3 is Kavari Russell. I'm a little higher on Kavari than you are, and there's a couple reasons why. Number one is Kavari was very good in his 3 seasons in Notre Dame. The thing that separated Kavari and Benjamin for me, both had great freshman years. Both had very good sophomore seasons. Then he gets suspended, so we don't see him in 2014. But then he comes back, and we see a full 2015 from Kavari, and he was outstanding. Whereas with Benjamin, we just didn't get that full 3rd year. And that was the disappointing thing. But Kavari was a winner. I mean, people, whatever you want to say about Kavari, in 2012, they're 12-1, and then they go 9-4 the next year, and then they're 10-3 his 3rd year. They were, and he missed 1 game in 2013 that they lost. I think they were something like 31-6 in games that Kavari started. It was like something like that, 31-6, 31-7. Just an outstanding football player. No, because he missed, I forget which game it was. But, the thing I liked about him too, Trev, he was clutch like Utah. I still remember the interception he had, the diving interception he had up the seam against Temple, which was a huge play. And Kavari was clutch. He was a good tackler. He was good in coverage. He was a playmaker. There just was so much I liked about him. I think a lot of people, I'm not saying you, but a lot of people don't give him the respect I think he's due because of the suspended year. There's some people that kind of look at that. I'm not talking about you, Trev. I'm just referring to conversation I've had where
in general, sure,
they will just not give him the love he gets. They won't talk about how good he was in 2015. They won't talk about how much they missed him in 2014. They won't talk about how good he was in 13 or 2012 because they're mad that he didn't play in 2014 and for the reasons he got suspended. And yeah, he messed up. But that's why he's 3rd, not 2nd or 1st on my list. You know what I mean? Like, Kavari was outstanding. Loved Kavari Russell as a player. My number 2 player is Shane Walton. And I did get a chance to see Shane Walton play. His career overlapped with the end of my college career and the beginning of my coaching career. So had a chance to really evaluate him as a little bit older than, and this is why kind of 2000 is the starting point, because you go back into the 90s, like now I'm fanboying it. I'm talking about Todd Light being number 1 on my list because I was a huge fan of Todd Light as a 10, 11, and 12-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, like I could go back and look at the resume like you are with Shane Walton, but that's where I'm fanboying it. With Shane, I could evaluate it. And the interesting thing is Shane is not even close to having the talent level of a lot of guys on this list. But he was an incredibly productive and instinctive player who came to Notre Dame, Trevor, on a soccer scholarship. He was on the men's soccer team to start his career. He did not come to Notre Dame as a football recruit. He came to Notre Dame as a soccer player and turned into the player that he became. And you look at his career, Trev, in 2000, he has 40 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions and 1 breakup. 2001, you start to see him kind of take it to the next level for Notre Dame. 43 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. 2002 is when he had his All-American season, Trev. He was that season, he was a unanimous All-American in 2002. 68 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 7 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and he was clutch. He was like what you're talking about, that guy that could just – he'd make those big plays in big moments. And you knew that he was like, oh, man, somebody's got to make a stop. You're like, oh, don't worry, Shane will make a play. And he had two of his interceptions he took back for touchdowns that season too, Trev. And this is a guy that at the combine, I believe, maybe I think it's from the combine, ran a 4.67 at 5'10". He was not an elite athlete. He was not an elite speed guy. He had great feet though, like you'd expect from a big time soccer player. Great feet, great change of direction. Tough, smart playmaker, just didn't have the elite talent. Like if you could have put like the athleticism that some guys that maybe were on the bottom of this list and given it to Shane Walton, he's a 10+ year NFL vet and an all-pro. Like that's what he had here and that's what he had here. He just didn't have the other things that God gave some of these other players, which is like, 6 feet with long arms and 4.4 speed. He ran a 4.67 at the combine and was still an elite player. For Notre Dame, Trev, an absolutely elite player, and was a joy to watch. But he was also part of like one of my favorite seasons as a fan. That 2002 season as a fan was like, hey, we're back, and then of course they really weren't. But that defense in 2002 has a lot of my favorite players on it. Obviously him, Jerome Sapp, Glenn Earl, Courtney Watson. A lot of those guys on it were just, and then. That season led to one of the best recruiting classes of the last 30+ years, which was the recruiting class that included Brady Quinn, Victor Abimiri, Jeff Samardzija, like that group of players. So I give them props for that as well. Like you were a key part of a season that led to us getting Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija and Chineda Ndukwe and Victor Abimiri and all those other guys. So Shane Walton was a heck of a player. That's why he was number 2 on my list.
I did not know he came to school as a soccer recruit. That's nuts. That's just absolutely
he was Jordan Faison, but soccer instead of football. Like it was the same exact kind of pathway. Like, we'll kind of let him walk on the football team, and you're like, hey, this guy's pretty flipping good at football. You know what I mean? But yes,
yeah,
yep.
Oh, that's awesome. My number 2 guy is Julian Love. His career at Notre Dame was exceptional.
I forgot to mention that Shane Walton was a Big East Freshman of the Year on the soccer team. He led the team in scoring in 1998. I just want to point that out when I compare him to Jordan Faison. He was legitimately a big-time soccer player. He wasn't just like on the team. He was like Jordan Faison, like Matt Jeffrey. He was an elite soccer player, reputation-wise and production-wise. He led the team as a true freshman, led the team in scoring, and was a freshman All-American or freshman of the year in the Big East. So
was he playing soccer at the same time he was playing football? Because aren't
no,
both
he ended
seasons
up,
in the
once he went to football, he was football.
Oh, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yep.
Still, just wickedly impressive. My number 2 guy is Julian Love, and this is a player that just had an outstanding career at Notre Dame. I mean, I'm with you. I thought his 2017 season he was fantastic. He was a big part of the resurgence of Notre Dame. They're coming off that ugly, just 4-8 year. It's gross. But Mike Elko looked at a guy like Julian Love, was like, that's a player that we can build this defense around. I mean, I still remember when they played against, what was his name? Ryan Finley, the quarterback at NC State. And the big thing was like, he hadn't thrown an interception all season long in X amount of passing attempts. And then Julian Love almost picks him off in the first half and then has a pick 6 either later in the first half or early on in the second half of that game. And then he went on in 2018. Simply put, you want to know the impact that he had. The outlook of the Clemson game in 2018, I think, looks a little bit different if Julian Love is able to play the entire game and does get knocked out of the game with a concussion. Now, I know some of the knocks that I've seen with Julian Love, I don't really put too much weight into. One, because this is a college football specific list of what they did at Notre Dame. I understand that Julian Love is no longer a corner and he's a safety in the NFL. But even that being said, he just won a Super Bowl and he's been a team captain on 2 teams that he's played on. Kind of tells me everything I need to know about his career and how it's going in the pros. Then the other knock is just Some people look at his interception numbers because we've had this talk on the show before about they only judge corners by how many interceptions that they have. I'm not under that impression. Brian, I know you're not under that impression, but that's kind of been another knock that I've seen on Julian. But he was an exceptional player for Notre Dame and a core part of their defense in back-to-back years. That's why he's my number 2 player, man.
What was the knock that you said, Trev? That people
Oh,
had
I've
on him?
seen. Oh, I didn't have on him.
No, you said that people that you
that
claimed
people
that people had on him.
Like his lack of like interception numbers and the fact that he doesn't play corner anymore.
Yeah. The fact he doesn't play corner anymore is completely irrelevant. I find it funny when people talk about interception numbers because, number one, he had 5 picks in 3 years. That's not bad. He played boundary corner his last year. This is a kid that in his last 2 years at Notre Dame, Trevor, had 36 pass breakups. Not passes defense, pass breakups. And if you want to complain about lack of interceptions, it's like, well, number one, they were a zone team. Number two, really? Really? This is a guy that had 131 tackles his last 2 years at Notre Dame. He's number 1 on my list, by the way. Julian Love's number 1 on my list. Because you can't take away. Now, is he the most talented corner they had? No, he's not. But here's what Julian Love did in his Notre Dame career, Trev. In 3 seasons, mind you, like 3 seasons, came in as a true freshman and eventually emerges as a starter. Now, what's interesting about that year is Dante Vaughn was the best of the 3. It was him, Julian Love, Troy Pride, and Dante Vaughn all in the same class. Dante was the best of them as a freshman, but then he had some hip and back issues that he just was never able to develop the way that he could have. But Julian had a good freshman season, and as a true freshman, has 45 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 pick, and 1 pick, and then 3 pass breakups as a true freshman. In 2017, as a true sophomore, has 68 tackles, 3 interceptions, 2 of which he returns for a touchdown. And the thing about it is they were big moments too. His first interception for a touchdown, Trev, if you remember, was he baited Brian Lewerke into a slant route pass in 2017. And Notre Dame was up. I think Notre Dame was up 7-0 at the time. I'm pulling up the box score now just to make sure I get this correctly. Yes, it was 7-0. Notre Dame had just scored. And Julian was baiting Lewerke. He had let him kind of complete a little hitch route. He was playing off. And then he steps back. And as soon as Lewerke does this, Julian Love drives in the ball, steps in front of it, runs it back for a touchdown. Huge play for Notre Dame. And then, of course, there's the NC State pick 6, which was a big moment as well. And essentially was that was the thing that kind of broke that game open. If I remember correctly, Trev, I'm looking at the recap. Wasn't Notre Dame only up a score when that happened? Let's see here. Yeah, it was 21-14 in the third quarter, and he has a 69-yard return that makes it 28-14, and then the game was over. It's 21-14 at halftime of that game. So he was super clutch, but incredibly productive. And this is kind of like looking at a defensive end and only looking at his sack numbers and pretending nothing else happened. You have a guy that has 36 pass breakups in his zone defense in 2 years. That's elite production. And then in 2018, Trev, he's a unanimous, I believe he's unanimous All-American. Let me just pull up Julian's resume here, but I believe Julian was a unanimous All-American in 2018. No, he was a consensus All-American, excuse me, in 2018. And what I have always said was that was even his best year. He got that for how good he was in 2017, and I think people realize we probably should have made him an All-American last year. But Notre Dame was a better team in 2018. They had more eyes on him. Remember in 2017, they were coming off of the 4-8 season, and I don't think people paid as much attention to how good Julian was that year. Comes out the next year, another very good season the next year, 16 pass breakups. And just an outstanding player. And then we all saw how important he was to the team because they were shutting Clemson down. He goes down with an injury late in the second quarter. They go for 2 straight touchdowns. Julian comes back in the second half, and they can't throw the ball on Notre Dame anymore. So we saw how important he was. And I also thought Julian, outside of like one play against Michigan, though what I've talked about, he was really good in big games as well. He was very good against Georgia in 2017. He was very good against Clemson in 2018. Like he was in outside of the one post route he gave up to Nico Collins against Michigan in 2018. Julian was also great in big moments. And that's why Julian is my number one player. Was he the most talented? No, he was not. Was he the most productive? It's not even close. When you look at the tackle numbers and the disruption numbers. No, the interceptions weren't as great as what Shane Walton did, but Shane Walton in his last 3 years had 7, 9, 11 interceptions, and he had 14 breakups. That's 25 passes defensed in 3 years. Julian Love had 23 in 2017 alone. And I think that set a Notre Dame record in pass breakups in a season. Then has 17 passes defensed the next year. So 40 passes defensed in 2 seasons at Notre Dame. That's why he's number one on my list. I don't care what he does in the NFL. Is Tim Tebow not a great college player because he wasn't a very good NFL player? Right. It's irrelevant. Right. He was a great college cornerback at Notre Dame. Now, I think that, like I said, had Kavari Russell not been suspended in 2014 and had Benjamin Morrison not got hurt in 2024, I think those two guys would have – one of those two could have eventually been number one on my list. I think that my number one on the list might change next year, but that's why Julian is number one on my list right now. Production, great teams, was a big part of Notre Dame's turnaround post-16, got the postseason awards, all of it, 4th-round draft pick. I think, was he a – hold on a second. He wasn't a team captain, I don't think. As a true junior, I don't think he was, but let me go look. Yeah, but he would have been a captain as a senior had he come back. But he was considered a leader, great representative of Notre Dame, like everything you want in a player, Julian Love was for 3 years at Notre Dame.
I get that completely. I love Julian Love at Notre Dame. My number one guy is Ben Morrison. And I understand he didn't finish his career at Notre Dame, and it's really unfortunate. But unlike some of the other players that we talked about on this list, for me, when I look at Ben Morrison, the reason why he wasn't able to finish wasn't his fault. The reason why his resume is incomplete, he didn't want to get injured. And I'm not saying Kavari Russell or anybody else wanted to get suspended.
I get it. I get it. But your actions still led to those things. Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Whereas for Ben Morrison, it's incomplete and it was out of his control, and it's unfortunate. But when I look at what he did on the field, he's the best cornerback I've seen at Notre Dame, in my opinion, in my time watching this team. I don't know if there's out of any other cornerback on this list, I don't know if I would be confident enough to look at, for example, somebody else I talked about on this list that is still in my top 10 since 2000. I don't know if I'm willing to look at Troy Pride and be like, okay, go lock up Marvin Harrison Jr. in 2023 for 60 minutes. Good luck. I had no concerns with Ben Morrison during that game. I have a couple buddies who are Ohio State fans like, hey, how you guys going to handle Maserati? And I'm like, we have Ben Morrison.
You know who the only other guy on the list that might have been able to do that? His teammate.
Yeah, honestly. Honestly. Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's the big moments. He gets to start a couple of games before Clemson, has a few rough patches, and then in the biggest game of his career up to that point, dude has a pick six, another interception when Cade Klubnik comes into the game, was exceptional coming up and run support. That
was his first pick. His first pick was the one against Cade Klubnik that set up a score. And then the second one he takes back. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just anytime I watch him, he had a lot of that Xavier Watts-esque of you need a play, where's 20? What's going on here? NC State, that game in 2023 was back and forth in the early part of it. Notre Dame was struggling to get any momentum going. Ben Morrison had an outstanding interception. I know we're not talking about NFL, but also out of anybody else on this list before his injury, he was the only one that I remember, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's the only one on this list that during his time at Notre Dame, people are like, he's going to be a first-round pick. It's just a question of when he goes, not if, and then obviously the injury happens.
And he still was a second-round pick with a devastating injury.
Right? Exactly. So it's just
I don't think any of those other guys, I don't remember, I don't know that Kavari was ever considered a first-round draft pick. Julian was not considered a first-round draft pick. I don't know that any of those guys were looked at that way. So I think you're correct there, Trev.
And it's just it comes down to when I watch him play, he was the most elite cornerback and had all of the tools encompassing. Now, are there some, would I have liked him to have Leonard Moore's size? Sure. Would I have liked him to have Robert Blanton's tackling power? Sure. But when I look at it, I think he's the most complete cornerback that I've seen play at Notre Dame.
Well, that would have been unfair.
Man. Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, if you'd have given him 6'2", Robert Blanton's tackling ability and Troy Pride's speed, you're like, well, who do you want? Champ Bailey? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, you're
Right.
gonna ding him because he wasn't Champ or Dion? Like, I mean, what are we doing
Right.
here? Well, I think Dion couldn't tackle, but Champ could tackle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, okay, sorry he wasn't Champ Bailey.
Right. Right. That's that, but it was he was big in big moments. I'm confident, and I know I'm the show me guy, but he showed me enough from 22 to midway
For
through
sure.
2024 that I wouldn't have any questions about how he would have performed in the postseason in 2024.
Yeah.
That's one that I'm willing to suspend a little bit of, but I didn't get to see it. I'm willing
Sure.
to say it's like I don't have to see
Well,
him, you
it's what
know.
I said to you when I talked about Benjamin, Trev. Like, that would have been the thing
Yeah.
that cemented him on the list. I have no doubt he would have played great in those moments. That's what kind of bums me out. I would have loved to have seen him against USC in 2024. I would have loved to have seen him
Oh,
in the postseason in 2024. You know, how many times have you heard a Notre Dame fan say, man, what if you had Benjamin Morrison against Ohio State? Why? Because it's like, well, he covered Marvin Harrison. Why couldn't he have covered Jeremiah Smith? You know, I mean, that's the thought process, and they're not
right.
wrong. Or, you know, maybe Leonard Moore would have been the one covering Jeremiah Smith because Benjamin would have still been the boundary. And look, he's my favorite cornerback on this list. As you guys know, I was very high on Benjamin Morrison. I was the one telling everybody, like, dude, this is a big time top 100 player. I don't care what anybody says. Him being a 3-star is absolutely stupid. I'm not surprised by the career he had. I just wish we would have seen it be completed.
Yeah.
That's really all it was for me, Trev, is because I
Absolutely,
got to
man.
see that third great year from Kavari Russell. I got to see that third great year from Julian Love. I got to see, you know, that you know, like the fourth great year from Shane Walton. That's what we missed out on in 2024 with
Yeah.
Benjamin. And so if you're going to go like kind of like, you know, they say pound for pound, but like game for game, I have no problem with you having Benjamin number one on your list. Like, I'm not going to push back on that at all. My thing was just, it's the incompleteness. We saw those other guys
Absolutely.
have that great final season. We didn't get a chance to see Benjamin have his great final season. But I am with you, Trev. Had he not been injured, I have no doubt that he's number one on this list. I have no doubt. I just love to hear the non-projection guy projecting something to get a guy number one. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I know.
But no, he was fun to watch. He was really fun to watch.
But what's crazy,
And he, by the way, he was a team captain as a true junior.
yeah,
We don't talk enough about that. One of my favorite things that says, you want to know everything you need to know about Benjamin Morrison? Go watch Here Come the Irish from 2024. And go watch the situation where I remember watching this and I remember thinking, that's why I love that kid. It's that meeting. He sits down with Marcus Freeman the week before the Indiana game. And he says, hey, coach, I just want to let you know there's a lot of people looking forward to Georgia. There's a lot of stuff in the locker room right now. Like, and he's like, you need to be aware of this. That's a leader. What did he have to gain from it? You know, like, he's done. His career's over, basically. But the fact that he stayed around and not only was around the team, but like was leading, was a leader, was coaching up Christian Gray, was coaching up Leonard Moore, and was doing things like that. Everything you need to know about Benjamin Morrison as a leader. And
100%.
that's something that adds to that resume that you're talking about as well, Trev. I just wish we could have seen him complete his last year.
No,
I really do. I really do. Would have been a lot of fun to watch.
I agree, man. I mean, yeah, we could sit here for hours and talk about what could have happened in the end of 24 if they just had him and Mills. But
so let's do one more thing, Trev, before we leave. Let's talk about our best cornerback duos, our best cornerback tandems. And let's, instead of going like 1 through 5, let's just go chronological and just kind of rapid fire these a little bit, because it's one thing to have a great room, a great player, but do you have a great room? So I'm going to give my 5, and then I want to hear your 5, and then we can give a couple honorable mentions here. So here's my 5 in chronological order. 2002, Shane Walton, Vontez Duff. Awesome cornerback tandem. They're both on my top 10 list. In like, see, 1, 2, 3 of my top 5, you have both corners on my top 10 list. The next one is 2005, Mike Richardson, Ambrose Wooden. I know a lot of people remember the play where Ambrose got beat, by Dwayne Jarrett against USC, but overall, they were pretty good that year.
Yeah.
I thought they were a very good tandem that season. And I think top 5, I think they're the one that I think is the most debatable, the one that I had the toughest time with. But I think scheme hurt that duo a lot, but those guys made a lot of big plays in their 2 years in their year together in 05. 2010, this was actually a trio, is why this group's on my list. Robert Blanton, Darren Walls, and Gary Gray. A lot of people remember Gary Gray for the 2011 season, and he had a bit of a meltdown in 2011. But in 2010, Gary Gray was very, very good in 2010. And I don't know if enough people really remember how good he was. The defense in 2010 was very good. And I mean, honestly, it was the best part of the team. They didn't get good on defense under Bob Diaco in 2012. They were good on defense under Bob Diaco the minute he showed up at Notre Dame.
100%.
And you look at that cornerback trio, they had 3 guys playing a lot together. They were very good that year. You had Gary Gray had 66 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1 interception, 7 pass breakups. Robert Blanton had 52 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 5 pass breakups. And then Darren Walls that season had 41 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, and 4 pass breakups. So not only were they good in coverage, but they had 12. Where's Darren? 14 tackles for loss that season as well. So the 2010 group is on there as well. 2018, no doubt about it, no brainer. Julian Love, consensus All-American. Troy Pride, very good that season. Really strong duo. And then my most recent duo is 2023. The Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison duo is the next duo on my list. If I had to say which one was number 1, with all due respect to Julian and Troy, I still say the best cornerback tandem that I've seen in an individual season for Notre Dame is 2023 Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison. That's at the top of my list. Julian Love, Troy Pride would be number 2. Shane Walton, Vontez Duff is 3. Blanton, Gray, Walls is 4. Richardson, Ambrose, Wood would be 5. So that'd be my ranking. What about yours, Trev? Let's give your 5.
Yeah. In chronological order, the first one that I have is 2012, Bennett Jackson and Kavari Russell. Now, one of the they're also the 5th team on my list. One of the things that's preventing them from being higher is throughout the regular season, they just didn't face any elite passing offenses.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then unfortunately for them, when they did against Alabama in the national championship game, A.J. McCarron had like 270 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. They also were going up against Amari Cooper. I'm not really knocking a true freshman Kavari Russell or a converted cornerback or a converted wide receiver in Bennett Jackson for not being able to lock up Amari Cooper. But that kind of skews it a little bit. But I still think as a duo over the course of their season in 2012, I thought that they were spectacular. And then they were able to kind of repeat that performance a little bit in 2013. And then next chronologically for me is Cole Luke and Kavari Russell in 2015. I thought they were a very fantastic duo. I think pretty underrated as well. Maybe not in the likes of the IB community, but when we talk about cornerback duos, obviously recency bias plays a factor. But I thought Cole Luke and Kavari Russell were fantastic in 2015. And what made their working relationship so good on the field was if there was a game where, Kavari Russell was kind of up and down, Cole Luke picked up the slack. I think back to the Clemson game in 2015. And then vice versa. If Cole Luke wasn't having a bad game against Temple, but then Kavari Russell steps up in a big moment and he makes a big play. So that would be next chronologically for me. And then next is that Julian Love, Troy Pride duo in 2018. They were fantastic. And Julian Love does not just carry the weight there. It's not Julian Love was fantastic in 2018, and I just have to include the duo. Troy Pride was also a very good cornerback in 2018, and people just need to remember that. My last 2 duos, they're in back-to-back seasons. I'm with you. 2023, Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison, they were, phenomenal. And then the fact that you add in Xavier Watts on the back end of that defense who won the Bronco Nagurski Award, just nuts. I echo the same thing that you did. Then the last one, if we're going chronologically, and this one's tough because technically it's a trio, but kind of played out like a duo. It's the 2024 cornerback room.
It's two duos.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it was.
It's two duos that was three guys. And
right.
the reason for it, and for me putting them in my top 5, is because there was almost no drop off from when you went from a junior captain, preseason All-American guy in Ben Morrison, and then Leonard Moore, who ended up a Football Writers Association of America freshman All-American and the defensive freshman of the year, according to the FWAA. There was not a drop off. And Notre Dame didn't lose the national championship game because Leonard Moore was in. Now, we can have the discussion that they may have lost it because they didn't have Benjamin Morrison, but it wasn't because 15 was in the starting lineup. And Jeremiah Smith has gone on record to say, even though he only faced him once for half a game, that Leonard Moore is the best cornerback that he's faced in college football. And that includes.
They went against each other a lot more than people remember from that game. They just remember the last play where Christian Gray was against him, but there were plenty of snaps where Leonard Moore and Jeremiah Smith were matched up against each other.
Yep.
People don't talk about it. They act like, why would you stick Christian Gray on the whole game? They didn't. Yeah, just shouldn't put him on that last play. We talked about that, but yeah.
Yep, absolutely. But those are my top 5 in order. I went the Jackson Russell duo at 5. And then I went because it was like kind of like a trio / double duo, I went Morrison, Gray, and Moore in the 4 spot. And then after that, I went Cole Luke and Kavari Russell in 2015, and then Love and Pride in 18, and then the Cam Hart, Ben Morrison duo in 2023. They were exceptional.
That was great. My runners-up, Trev, I had the 2012 group on there. They were one of my 3 runners-up. 15 was one of my runners-up as well, and then 2024 was one of my runners-up as well. Those were very, very good seasons. I had a tough time leaving 2015 off, and it's one of those things where I'm like, looking back, I'm like, man, I should have put them on there over 05. And that's why, like if I had to do a redo, drop 05 and put 15 on there is probably what I would do. That'd be the first one that I would replace them with as I think through it. So
05. Go ahead.
Richardson and Ambrose Wooden, I'd probably drop them and put the 15 team on there. The Cole Luke Kavari Russell duo deserves a little bit more respect on my list.
05 was in one of my runners up. I know they shouldn't be, but this is kind of back when I was still like fanboy of the team. I'm obviously not diving in and breaking down film when I'm 9 years old. But I thought about putting the 06 duo in there just because of Terrell Lambert's pick 6 against Michigan State. Honestly, but I was like,
Terrell and Ambrose, wasn't it?
Mike Richardson was still on the team in 06 too.
The trio then, yeah.
Yeah. So
because I thought Ambrose was on that team as well.
He was. And so I thought about it, but I was like, outside of like that play and Terrell Lambert's interception against UCLA, it's like, I can't just put
the Michigan game alone gets them off the list.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they wanted nothing to do with Mario Manningham.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't. Yeah. But 05 was on that runners-up list for me. I'm trying to think if there's any others. But I'll tell you what, I couldn't put him in my top 10 list, and I forgot to mention him. I couldn't put him in my top 10 list because he only played at Notre Dame for a year, but people sleep on Nick McLeod's season in 2020. I'll say that. And he couldn't make my top 10 list because he was only there for a year. We wouldn't have known what he did play the previous 4 years at NC State. But
I don't even know that it'd be in my top 10 best individual seasons, but it was a very important season.
Yes.
It was one of the most clutch seasons. No doubt about it. Because it's like Kavari in 2012. If they hadn't if he isn't there, I don't know who the corner's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. But yeah. There were some good individual seasons from some corners. And here's a guy that wasn't on my list that, had he been coached by Mike Mickens, is a no-brainer on my list, if not top 5, is Cole Luke. Cole Luke's 2014 season is one of the best seasons from a cornerback. I mean, he had 41 tackles. No, I mean, where it was 48 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 4 picks and 11 breakups as a true sophomore. And then he just got worse every year because he played under frickin' Brian Van Gorder.
Mm-hmm.
So Cole Luke is another one of those what ifs. Here's one other what if. What if Sean Crawford doesn't get hurt?
Yep.
I think he's on this list as one of the top 10 corners.
I think so too. That is exactly where I was going to go, man. If he didn't get hurt and play for the tail end of the BVG defense, yeah, that would have, yeah.
Because he couldn't play corner anymore after the 3rd injury. That's why they moved him to safety and nickel. 2015, people forget this. He was going to start at nickel in 2015 as a true freshman before he tore his ACL. He had earned that spot in a week of practice. Yeah. Tears his Achilles or tears his ACL, comes back in 2016, has a pick 6 in the first game of his career at Texas. He plays great that football game. And then, did he have a pick 6 or just a pick?
He got just a pick, and then he also ran back a blocked field goal or a blocked PAT.
That's right. I remember him doing both, but I was like, hold on a second. Those two things weren't the same. Then he plays really well against Nevada and then pounds the ground after a play and then tears his Achilles. And he was just never the same guy after that. Had Sean Crawford the fact that he could tear his ACL twice or his ACL and both Achilles and still be a multi-year starter at a place like Notre Dame tells you the kind of athlete Sean Crawford was at 5'8". I mean, I still will always think of the forced fumble he had against Michigan State in 2017, where he closes in. I think it was Le'Veon Bell. I think it's who it was. Right before he gets to the goal line, punches it out, then recovers it. It was 17-7, Trev. They were about to make it 17-14. And then Notre Dame gets the ball and goes right down the field and scores and takes the lead. Actually, no, it was 21-7, I think is what it was. And it was about to be 21-14. And then he has that play. Then Notre Dame goes right down the field. And instead of it being 21-14, it ends up being 21-7. And then Notre Dame just rolled them after that. That was such a huge play. Such a huge play. Or, excuse me, it made it 28-7, and then it was over. Because it was 21-7. They were about to score, make it 21-14. He recovers the ball in the end zone, goes out to the 20. Notre Dame goes right down the field and scores and make it 28-7. That completely changed that game on the road against a team that finished that year with 10 wins. That was huge.
You want to talk about a what if? I'm with you. If Sean Crawford didn't get hurt and they had better coaching in 2015, the back end of that defense would have been Kavari Russell and Cole Luke on the outside, Sean Crawford at the nickel, and Max Redfield and Elijah Shoemate at safety.
With Matthias Farley working in that 3-man rotation as well. You're talking about wasted talent? That is the most wasted talent season in Notre Dame history. If it's either then or 11. Yeah. 2 most wasted seasons in Notre Dame history. When you think of all the talent. And who they have a linebacker? Oh, I don't know. Just some kid named Jalen Smith. With Sheldon Day, Romeo Okwara, Isaac Rochelle, and Jerron Jones on the D-line. And they still gave up 24 points a game.
And a true freshman, Jerry Tillery.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Jerron Jones. It was Jerry Tillery. Jerron Jones.
Jerron Jones was also there. Hurt. Yeah.
He got hurt in fall camp. Yeah. And then came back for the bowl game. So, yeah, that team was so loaded and still gave up over, I think it was 24 points a game. I think is what it was. But that's when people say, well, Brian Kelly, couldn't recruiting and admissions. Like, yeah, right. The admissions that let all them dudes on the field. Yeah, 24.1 points a game they allowed. 24.1. A team with all that talent. It's gross.
Oh,
yep.
Man.
And by the way, it was Drew Tranquil that tore his ACL celebrating wasn't a touchdown. It was I think it was an interception or a pass breakup.
Yeah.
In the end zone against Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Sean pounded his foot on the ground after an incomplete pass and tore his Achilles. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. But not to worry, there's still more Irish Breakdown content coming your way. IB Nation Sports Beat goes live tonight at 5:05. They're talking more about Coach Lou Holtz, who passed away yesterday, and then they're also talking about C.J. Carr and Bill Connolly's ranking for him as the number 1 quarterback coming back in college football this upcoming season. So you're not going to want to miss that show either. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. As always, the best way to support what we do here, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the Friday free-for-all mailbag. So get those questions ready. Be sure to have those ready to submit and have a fun one tomorrow to end the week. But until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.